You're listening to the Mother-to-Baby Podcast, medications and more during pregnancy and breastfeeding. Ask the experts with your host, genetic counselor and mom of four, Chris Stallman.
This episode contains evidence-based information that's current as of the day recorded and may change as more data becomes available. To get the very latest information about this topic or other topics in pregnancy and breastfeeding, please contact a mother-to-baby specialist at 866-626-6847, by text at 855-999-3525, or through our website at MotherToBaby.org. Welcome to another episode of the Mother-to-Baby Podcast. My name is Chris Stallman, and I'm a genetic counselor, a mother of four, and a teratogen information specialist. So what I do is I talk to people, so patients, family members, healthcare providers, about exposures before pregnancy, during pregnancy, while breastfeeding, and in cases of adoption. And typically on the podcast, we talk about exposures, and exposures can be anything. So medications, vaccines, hair treatments, chemicals at your job, stuff like that. But actually today, we're going to talk a little bit more about research. And part of the reason that we want to do that is because research is an important part of what Mother-to-Baby does. So we have the Mother-to-Baby Pregnancy Studies, which is a research program that looks at if and how certain medications or vaccines or health conditions may affect a pregnancy. These studies are not clinical trials. They don't ask a study participant to take any medications or get a vaccines or make very large changes to their lives. The studies collect information about a person's pregnancy and then after their baby's born, the health of the baby. And the reason that we do it is because there is not a lot of information about some medications being used during pregnancy. And of course, many people who are pregnant need to take medications either before, during, or after their pregnancy. And people who are pregnant can't participate in research studies that look at the safety of medications. So that means that there's not a lot of information sometimes, and in some cases, there's no information about a certain medication. And what Mother-to-Baby Pregnancy Studies wants to do is to help add to that information. What we're going to be talking about today specifically in terms of research is preterm delivery. And that's why we have a special guest with us today to cover this important topic. Jonathan Cherry serves as Senior Director of Research Operations for the March of Dimes. He works with researchers and groups around the globe to understand and improve pregnancy outcomes. He has also worked in various roles from laboratory bench to the boardroom in settings such as academia, industry, and government. He is also a parent. Jonathan, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me here. I'm super excited.
It's our pleasure. So we're going to just jump right in. And if you could tell us, what is preterm birth?
So preterm birth is when a baby is born too early, usually before 37 weeks of pregnancy have been completed.
What are some of the causes of preterm birth?
So preterm birth, like pregnancy, is it's a pretty complicated event. So many times we actually don't know what causes someone to deliver early, but we do know that there are several factors that can increase the risk or likelihood that someone could deliver early. And these can be things like behavioral items like tobacco use or substance use and even stress. Sometimes it's characteristics, social, personal, economic characteristics. So women who are over the age of 35 or in their teens, Black women are at a higher risk of this, and women in lower incomes are generally at higher risk. Additionally, there are medical complications that can put you at a higher risk for this. So if you've had a prior preterm birth, if you're carrying more than one baby, like twins or triplets, or if you have an existing infection. And also, if you've gone through assisted reproductive technology, or if you're going through what's called in vitro, you're usually at a higher risk for preterm birth, usually because at that point you can be pregnant with more than one baby at a time.
Gotcha. So there can be lots of different causes. And so there's not one thing that people should look out for, but if there are concerns, it would be a good idea to discuss this with their healthcare provider.
100%. I mean, I can't stress that enough, that if something doesn't seem right, you should probably talk to your healthcare provider.
I would definitely agree. So my third son, actually, who just had a birthday recently, he was born at 37 weeks exactly. And that's because I was having a medical complication. And just like you said, there's a lot that goes into it. And so they did not want me to deliver before then, but right at 37, they wanted to deliver just because, it was starting to get a little bit dangerous for me and my son.
You're fortunate. You have a very good healthcare provider, and you were an advocate for yourself. I think that's one of the main sources of good outcomes for folks who have high risk factors for preterm birth is being aware, and then getting the right help at the right time.
I couldn't agree more, especially these days with healthcare being, complicated and sometimes even harder to get than previously. So can you tell us about the research that the March of Dimes is doing on preterm birth?
Sure. So March of Dimes has a pretty large research portfolio in general. So I would be remiss if I didn't mention that we do research into everything that would impact pregnancy and healthy outcomes for moms and babies, including nutrition, developmental biology, study into birth defects, cardiovascular disease, how social determinants of health, or where you are, impacts outcomes, as well as the mental health of the family and surroundings. But specifically preterm birth, March of Dimes has dedicated a big portion of our research portfolio to this. And we've done this through standing up what are called prematurity research centers. So these are 5 centers that exist throughout the world, from London to the United States, and everywhere in between. And these are focused on ending preventable preterm birth. So 5 centers, 1 goal. These were started in the early 2000s with that 1 goal. And it's a great setup in the sense that a lot of research centers that do exist are in competition with one another. And this is the first one where everybody works together because they have that common goal. So I'm just going to say I'm really proud to be involved in it. Some of the work that's being done focuses on what you mentioned at the beginning. So we work to describe or characterize. We work to mitigate or support folks, and then we work to predict or prevent all of these events. So what we call adverse pregnancy outcomes, or APOs, in sort of the way that we speak it, is characterizing as understanding. So our research centers, I'll just use the Ohio Collaborative because that's the one that I'm closest to right now. This includes Case Western Reserve and University of Cincinnati, Vanderbilt University, are studying things like what makes the uterus switch from resting to contracting. And of course, that's one of the first things that happens in preterm birth. It's not the only thing, but when a birth happens beforehand, the uterus starts contracting and starting the delivery process. So if we can understand what causes that switch, we can maybe get ahead of it. We can maybe begin to support somebody who's going through that or mitigate that. Maybe there's a trigger that we can control through nutrition, through environment. So really understanding what causes preterm birth is one of the big goals. I'll just take a moment here and say the prematurity research centers, the 5 centers, are Imperial College London in the UK, University of Pennsylvania, University of California, San Francisco, Stanford University, and what we call the Ohio Collaborative, which includes Case Western University of Cincinnati, and by extension Vanderbilt University, because of some aligned work. Each one of those is focused on several of the same research topics. So if I say something like characterizing preterm birth, understanding preterm birth, each one of those is trying to understand it in a different way. Imperial College London may be looking at what's called glycobiology or microbiome. So you may have heard of microbiome. It's sort of the environment that is within your body, and the bacteria and all of the other things that are sort of going on inside of your body naturally, and how that changes as pregnancy comes along. And sometimes as changes happen that can trigger preterm birth. University of Pennsylvania, for example, will be looking at maternal and infant health equity. So how, and social determinants of health, it's not the only thing, but how your environment, not just inside your body, but that you're living in, can actually impact and trigger potentially preterm birth. Ohio Collaborative is working on the genetics and genomics. Stanford University working on quality improvements and medical interventions. And University of California, San Francisco, UCSF, is actually taking a lot of that data, and it's not just them, but they're kind of the lead on this, taking all of that data and trying to generate hypotheses. So they're sort of our data science folks. They're the folks who are looking at all of the things put together and trying to find that little hidden signal inside all of the data that we've collected over time to say, that's something we should explore. There's something we didn't see, because Chris, when we go back and we look at how complex pregnancy is, there's a lot of things going on. I mean, You've got environment, you've got your genes, you've got how your genes are talking, you've got, did I drink out of a plastic baby, like a baby bottle when I was a baby? Does that impact it? Well, maybe. Am I at stress at work? And, what am I going through right now in my environment? How am I on my Twitter feed, et cetera, et cetera. So University of California, San Francisco is able to look at a lot of those data and start to look for those signals that then each of the others and themselves can actually go out and try to explore. That's one part. So that's trying to understand it. Next question is, what can we do to sort of help or mitigate or get in front of this? And each of those PRCs is working on areas like, well, how do we make sure that we're heart healthy? How do we make sure that we're reducing cardiovascular risk? How do we make sure that the functional and mechanistic, or the things that actually do things in the body, can support pregnancy? And then finally, getting to that point where, we all put ourselves out of a job in preventing preterm birth because we've done it. And actually, what can we do to predict and prevent? So what can we do to get ahead so that it doesn't happen? So that it just doesn't happen. So this can be something like, does supplementation work? Should you be taking omega-3 fatty acids? Should you be taking low-dose aspirin? Should you be moving? Should you not be moving? How your parents grew up impact does it? Is there anything that we can do to put systems in place that are going to be able to prevent this? So that's kind of the way that we look at it. That's how all of our groups are looking at it. And, I'll just take a moment and say, March of Dimes. So when I joined just a little bit less than a year ago. And we were the original Kickstarter, right? So we were one of the ones who was like, you know what, we're going to eradicate polio. Send in your dimes. That's what we're going to do. 85 years ago, almost, I think, to the day of when we're recording this, 85 years ago, send in your dimes. And they raised something like $2 million just from dimes. Eradicated polio through the vaccines, through the Salk and the Sabin vaccines, and basically accomplished the goal. We're one of the only nonprofits to have done that. And I think with preterm birth, we can actually do that again. So I know that everybody on our team feels the same way. Our researchers feel the same way. It's an exciting time to be here to solve a big problem in the world.
And like you mentioned, I think it's so exciting and encouraging that, so many different groups are working together, because my guess, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but, part of the reason that we all collectively want to know more about preterm delivery and how to help prevent it or maybe change it is really to improve outcomes for families. Is that right?
Oh my gosh, yeah, I couldn't have said it even better. Preterm birth doesn't just affect the mom and the baby. It affects, if you're fortunate enough to have a support network around you, of family, friends, and concerned folks, you're fortunate. But those folks are also impacted, and it's a struggle. It is a struggle. As a father myself, I was fortunate enough that I myself didn't, and my family did not go through preterm birth, but we have been impacted by things that didn't go quite right, and I feel for those who are going through it, and anything that we can do to prevent it, or at least help folks understand that it's not their fault.
Yes.
Right? This is not something that they did, and I think that's so. When I started in research, I met my wife while she was also a researcher, and we've gone through a long journey together. One of the first things we realized was the folks that we're helping out, we may never meet them, and that's okay. But what we want them to understand is, life is a beautiful thing. Like birth is a beautiful thing, and when it goes right, you just don't. All the pain is worth it. But when it goes kind of sideways, it's not your fault. It really isn't. And helping folks understand that, look, these are some of the things that contributed to it. It could have gone one way, it could have gone the other, but you've got support. You're not alone in what you're going through, and we're here to try to help make sure that it doesn't happen again.
I can't tell you from a personal and a professional perspective how much I appreciate that, how much I appreciate the research, the collaboration, the organizations. Pregnancy is scary. Pregnancy is wonderful if that's what you want. And like you said, it doesn't even have to be something as serious as preterm delivery. When we think about, what we do here at Mother2Baby and medications and our pregnancy studies and looking at people who take medications, people need to take medications. There's in a lot of cases, there's no way around it. You have to treat your illness. And I just really appreciate you saying, from a completely different perspective, that we know that people who are pregnant and their families are doing the very best that they can. And sometimes things don't go as planned, but it's not on you. It's not your fault. And to have that support there and then the research to help those folks, that's just a really excellent place to be.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons that I've stayed in research almost my entire adult life. I started very early in it, and I realized that I could solve interesting questions and I could ask interesting questions. But if it doesn't make the world better, kind of what's the point? And this is one of the first places where, holy smokes, like this is really great. I just want to say one thing that has come out of research. So the more you know, sometimes the scarier it can be, right? So I mentioned that I met my partner, my spouse, in research, and the work that we were doing was in something called aneuploidy. So it's when chromosomes, so parts of your genetic code that are packaged together in these little squiggly things that look like worms on a picture, when they don't do or end up where they're supposed to, you can get things like Down syndrome. You can get things like Creeder-Shy. You can get some really scary sounding things. And that's when I realized that we've got a duty to make sure that folks understand this is not their fault. Like this is something that they had very little control over. But to my point about the more you know, sometimes the scarier it can be. When we first got pregnant, holy smokes, did we try to do absolutely everything right, almost to the point where we went like the other side. So, I have a fairly small family, but what I'll say is, there comes a point where you do the best you can
Mm-hmm.
with what you got where you are, right? So from my perspective, and I've helped my siblings and friends through this because they're asking me, what should I do? What should I do? What should I do? And I, I have this thing. It just is these little tips like, ready, just know what your risk factors are. Ready? I mean, if you are a regular smoker, if you're a regular drinker, if you're, if you take medicine that you have to take, that's fine. I'm not going to judge you on that. If you want to make the change, that's fine. If you can make the change, but also know that that's a risk factor, not just for preterm birth, but for long-term impact. Recognize the signs of things like preterm birth. So if you're, I don't know, 30 weeks in, 35 weeks in, you're like, whoa, that feels like I'm menstruating again. Like that doesn't feel right. That's probably not a good sign. Go see your doctor, right? Do what you can to lower that risk. Get help if something seems off. You're the one who knows your body better than anyone in the world. Like you're in it. And more so to what I was mentioning before is just know that you're not alone. Like
Yeah.
for everybody who's in there, from a father perspective, I have no idea, right? Like I don't know truly what my wife went through. I was there in the room when everything was going on, and you feel completely helpless. That's not to take away from what a mother is going through or a person who's delivering is going through, but it's just to say, like, you're not alone. It's okay. You'll get through this. Like everything will be eventually okay. But if you need help, like you're not alone. Go get some help. Like it's there. You're not a bad person for getting it. You're not broken for getting it. Like you know your body, you know you. If something doesn't seem right, just go get that help.
Absolutely. Feel free to reach out. Absolutely. It's such a great message. And it isn't just for the person who is or was pregnant. Partners, fathers, spouses, whomever you are in this relationship dynamic, there is support for you too. And you said it very well. You don't know what your wife went through. Like you didn't personally experience it. However, you had your own experience, and that is also incredibly valuable and worthy of attention and support. So I always love when we have people with different perspectives on the show because we think about our own things in a bubble. I think about my life in a bubble, my work in a bubble, whoever I'm helping. But that other perspective, partners, non-pregnant family members, people who are involved, you are incredibly valuable, and there is support out there for you too. Jonathan, we're coming towards the end of the podcast, but before I let you go, what message would you like to leave our audience with?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here, Chris. Preterm birth is not a great thing to have happen. There are things that you can do right now. If you know what your risk factors are, or you're curious about what your risk factors are, best thing you can do is get educated and then get support. So when we were starting our pregnancy journey, we went to marchdimes.org, and we went to the Find Support tab. And this is before we were planning on becoming pregnancy. There's some great resources there. Get to know what your risk factors are. So pregnancy is a complex natural event, and there's only so much that you can control. So like I said, being aware of what your risk factors are, what you've been exposed to, can help you and your healthcare provider and your partner plot the right course of action in your pregnancy journey. If something doesn't seem right, of course, connect with your healthcare provider, get testing. And then I'd be remiss to say, if I didn't say, take care of yourself. If you're planning to become pregnant, take care of yourself. This holds for any pregnancy event from your first to your fourth. I mean, there are things you can do to give your baby the best possible start in life. And this includes taking care of your physical and mental health, as well as building out and having that network of support if you're fortunate enough to have it. There are ways that if this is, like you've done all these things and you want to continue to support, there are a couple of ways that you can help research. There are a couple of ways that you can help families that are going through this. So you can participate. March Dimes has these great events every year called March for Babies. And these are these convening events. They're usually held locally. I'm going to participate in a couple events this year. just because I like to travel. So March for Babies, marchforbabies.org is where we have these. You can meet other folks. You can support the mission to end preventable preterm birth. And this year, we're actually trying to get our researchers out to that. So find your local board, find your local March for Babies, get involved that way. I would say if you can, it's our birthday. Help us celebrate. So we have a couple of fundraisers. I mentioned we were the original Kickstarter, send in your dimes and we'll eradicate polio. So we do have a throwback fundraiser. I'll send you a link about it, but it's our 85th birthday. We're not asking for a whole lot. Feel free to give what you can. They have several avenues at March Dimes, from estate planning, long-term planning, and then specifically research funding. So that program is what I'm obviously selfishly interested in, but it supports the awards, the awardees, the grants, and the operations of the research department to make sure that we can end preventable preterm birth.
And Jonathan, before I let you go, number one, thank you so much for being on today. We really appreciate your work and your insight and your enthusiasm. And happy 85th birthday to the March of Dimes.
Thank you so much, Chris, for having us. This has been a real treat, and I look forward to coming on again soon if you let me be so.
You
better, so fortunate.
You better be careful, because I will hold you to that. We would love to have you back.
Well, maybe next time we'll have, maybe we can bring on a researcher or two from our group. They have great stories, and they can talk about some of the work that they're doing.
Awesome. The more the merrier. Thank you again. And that does it for this episode of the Mother to Baby podcast. As always, thank you so much for joining us. You can find this and all of our episodes however you listen to podcasts. So on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you prefer to get them. You can also find the podcast on our website, so MotherToBaby.org. And on the website, you can also find out how to contact us in case you have questions about exposures before or during pregnancy, while breastfeeding, or in cases of adoption. So you can reach us by phone at 866-626-6847, by text message at 855-999-3525. On our website, you can engage with our chat feature and chat with a Mother to Baby specialist that way. And if you have a question about the podcast, if you have a comment, if you want to be on the podcast or have an idea for a future episode, we would love to hear from you. So you can email us at contactus@mothertobaby.org. Remember, Mother to Baby is here for you. Take care.
Mother to Baby is a service of the nonprofit organization of Teratology Information Specialists and supported by the Health Resources and Service Administration of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. It's made possible through generous donations from listeners like you. To learn more about Mother to Baby, please visit mothertobaby.org.